Hi, I'm Catherine Ayers-Wickenhauser, Director of Communications at Direct Trust, and I am so excited today to be joined by Lou Galterio from Suncoast Rio, who has recently been named one of our interoperability heroes. Lou, welcome. Will you introduce yourself and tell us more about Suncoast Rio?
Hi, thank you, and thank you for having me here. So my name is Lou Galterio, and I have been around for a while. I've been through three different industries in my life. Started as an engineer. I'm a trained electrical engineer, and started working at what is now Verizon in New York City. And then I went into the banking industry and the capital markets, even lived in Asia for a while. And finally, my true love all along has been healthcare. So I started the company where I'm in now, which is Suncoast Rio. Suncoast Rio is a regional health information organization. That's what Rio stands for. And the idea, I was a CIO back in New York at New York City Health and Hospitals Corporation and another large hospital up there, New York Presbyterian. And so when I moved to Florida, I knew that not many people were going to be ready for what I just experienced in New York. I automated their public hospital system. So I started the Suncoast Rio as a way to train or present to the doctors and the consumers of healthcare people on how the medical world was changing to an electronic medium. So that was back in 2012 when we did that. We started as a nonprofit. And this is an important piece of the journey in that by being a nonprofit, a lot of hospitals down here and the senior administration, I was able to build up a level of trust with the medical community. They didn't view me as a vendor trying to sell them something. So they didn't view me as having ulterior motives. So they actually had, some of our larger hospitals actually had me sit in on meetings where vendors came to see if they were getting a straight story. So I'll make this a short story, but when the government created the Office of Technology, ONC, I forgot what the C stands for, but when the ONC was created as part of the Recovery Act, it created some organizations that funded health information exchange, the certification of electronic health records, and training doctors on how to use these things. So basically made my company redundant. And so we decided to go out of business. However, a lot of my clients said, don't go out of business. We really need what you do. Why don't you become make yourself a for-profit company and we'll buy services from you. So that's the short story we did. In 2013, Suncoast Rio became a for-profit. We're a C corporation. We're incorporated in the state of Florida. And just to finish this off, what do we do? Primarily our deliveries to our customer base is the ability to electronically transmit certified and very secure information. So what I mean by that is if a doctor or a hospital needs to report quality measures to the government, they could use us. The government sees this from us and they say, okay, it's good. We had to go through a lot of certification and testing to get there. The same thing with audit. If a hospital gets audited and they need to respond, they have a choice of responding with paper or responding electronically. And if they go electronically, there's only 15 companies in the country that is accepted by the government to do that, and the commercial payers too. And we're one of those 15. And then we still do consulting. We help our hospitals and doctors with what was meaningful use and that kind of technology. So we use direct messaging. We did a big project for CMS called Electronic Medical Documentation Interoperability. We do work with FHIR. We do work with X12, EDI. So I'm, a lot of things. So I'll just leave it there unless you want to ask me more about drilling down on that stuff.
No, I think that's great, Lou. And, certainly, obviously, trust is in Direct Trust. We certainly agree that trust is a major component for that relationship, especially with the transmission of secure and protected health information. So certainly can agree there. And I'm curious for your perspective, knowing that there are so many different components to health technology. Do you see these different technologies, groups, and organizations coming together in a single approach? You mentioned that you have relationships with different standards and different organizations. So just curious if you see these different constituencies and different pieces coming together into one in some capacity.
We have to define what we mean by one. And if we mean by one, a unitary system that works well, a system, don't forget, a system means more than one part. I'm going to lean back on some of my background again, where I was in the financial industry, and I was one of the people who started Depository Trust Clearing Corporation, which is a bond clearing company. Actually, it's been around for 100 years, but we modified it so that they could do all kinds of bonds. So what I learned was, and in the bank as well, Bankers Trust, which is now Deutsche Bank, what I learned was that you have systems all over the place. You have different countries, you have different people you're serving, and it's the whole spectrum. And what really works is to view it in an architectural way. That's the one. So when you're talking about an architecture, there are pieces of that one thing that never change, and then there are the pieces around it that do. So if you think of it like that, there's always going to be change. You have to plan for change. And if the architecture is well built, and if the people and the systems that interact with it are well done and follow standards, you'll have your one system.
Great. And I'm curious too, so you mentioned the architecture and the technology component, but you also just mentioned people. And so I'm very curious if we can talk about this for a moment, because how do we see the people of the industry who are employed and work in the industry, but also the people who are served by the industry, patients and consumers, those people who are experiencing this health IT industry in some way, how do they fit into that picture that you just described?
That is an excellent question. And I'm so glad you asked it. If you look at my LinkedIn profile, you'll see I have my motto there is it's about people. If you think of healthcare itself, it is about people. It's about the people who are well, people who are sick, the people who care for them. And it's about the people who are trying to serve this market. I call it a market. It almost sounds, when we're talking about healthcare, it's ingrained into everybody who's alive today. There is nobody that you're going to ever meet that doesn't have a story about healthcare, a personal story, be it good, be it bad, but we're all touched by this. So yes, the healthcare system and the architecture, we have to include the component of people in there. So I mentioned the EMDI project I did with CMS. Well, we did it alone. We presented to CMS, where we looked at a patient that was being discharged from, we looked at a patient that went into a health department system and they found something wrong. So they referred the patient to a hospital, and that hospital admitted that patient. And then after that stay, discharged the patient, and the patient then had to go to various stops along the way in the healthcare continuum until ending up in a home health and a skilled nursing facility, first skilled nursing, then home health. So we're talking about maybe 60 different systems, 60 different stops, different technologies, some with EHR, some without, some practice management, some on paper, where we needed OCR readers. We were able to show that we could track what that patient went through with a record that was a legal record, and it was secure, and it showed every place and what happened and who was involved. So without that patient, we have no architecture, we have nothing. And you also mentioned the people who work in the industry. I'm a technician myself. I'm also a person who needs healthcare, especially my age group. So I think it's important to understand, my message to the people there is the technology, make sure you're doing it as well as you can, as perfect as you can, because people's lives could be hanging in the decisions you make. But don't let that scare you either. I think the real key in my mind is we have to stop talking to ourselves and completely 100%. So if you go to like an engineering conference and a person from the street walks in, they don't know what the engineers are talking about. And we tend to do that. We use our jargon together, we talk about things, and then we're in a room with doctors or regular consumers, they get the deer in the headlight look. So I think there has to be a very proactive approach to making sure what we're doing is known by the people we're doing it for.
I could not agree more. And, we joke in this industry a lot, especially within the health IT and marketing community, just about the jargon and the acronyms, and that you just need this list to understand what other people are saying. And it's so true because, often I find personally when I'm talking to friends who are physicians, if I say the term interoperability, they don't know what I'm talking about. So I'm really curious. I think that gives us a great segue into something that I want to ask you specifically about. So, we talked about the importance of architecture and how architecture can be something that stays and is foundational and solid, but the world evolves around it, and how the people fit into that as well. But I'm also curious, so taking that a step further to interoperability specifically. So how do you see technology and people specifically working into that concept? How does what you just described apply specifically to interoperability?
Boy, that's hard. So I think we need to understand the people who are not technologists and what they would use as a trigger or a bridge into the world we're building for them. So there was a number of starts and failures with personal health records. There was, I don't want to name companies, but there were a lot of companies who got involved and said, this isn't working. And that, I think, goes back to my early days in my generation when I was trying to get people to use computer technology to check their healthcare. In the day I'm from, the feeling was, if the doctor says to do it, I'm going to do it. I'm not a doctor. I don't need to understand it. So, but I think now, and this is a really good point you're making and helping me make too, is now you have the younger generation, the people behind us, the millennials and all the generations, this and that, they're not afraid of technology. And as a matter of fact, how could they possibly? Everyone's on the cell phone, everyone's on the Android, everyone technology is ingrained in how they live and how they work. And so with something as important as healthcare, not just to the person, but when you're talking about your family, when there's people who are ill that you're taking care of, and that's happening a lot. When you have people who worry about their children who think they're invincible and they're never going to get sick, so they don't get health insurance. And so the parents, this is a big trigger for the parents. And then, if you look on the bigger picture, look at the economy, where our gross domestic product for the whole country on an annual basis, about 20%, 1/5 of it is related to healthcare costs and expense and revenue. So, and it's growing more and more. So this is going to touch people in the pocketbook. This is going to touch people in the things they care the most about, where their hearts are. So you asked me to be specific. How can I be more specific on how we could bridge that gap? I'll tell you one of the things that I look at the generation coming up behind me, and I think, wow, brilliant people. You look at things like blockchain technology, and I don't just mean Bitcoin for paying for things, but the whole idea of a blockchain system that is secure, is relatively, I don't want to say 100% because there is no 100%, but it will greatly reduce ransomware and hackers, and it'll keep a record of what's going on in the world. So I think one specific solution is to somehow embrace the blockchain technology, the crypto technology. And again, I'm not just talking about currency, I'm talking about just the technology as the architecture I was talking about before. There's some fantastic ideas out there.
And I think we see that there are more and more ideas that come to the forefront as we address interoperability and other health IT concepts. But one thing that resonates with me is some of the things that have stayed the same. So thinking about what you just described with healthcare and the cost of healthcare and gross domestic product, we've heard of the triple aim and the quadruple aim and all of these different aims, but a lot of that is centered around the flow of information, right? And to decrease that cost, to decrease redundancy, to make sure that providers have that information at the right time to ensure that we eliminate some of that cost. So I really, it's incredible to think about how much progress we continue to have, how we're still marching forward, but we still also have some of those foundational concepts that remain at the core of what we're doing. And I think that's a lot of what you're describing. And so I'm curious too, just looking towards the future, thinking about maybe some of those core concepts. And you just mentioned blockchain as an emerging technology. But what else would you expect in the future?
Well, it's funny, as we're speaking together, we're both in direct trust. We both use direct messaging, and I'm assuming everybody knows what we're talking about who's going to see this. That's a bad assumption. But I mean, I think one of the answers to this question and the one before is that people embrace messaging. Electronic mail is texting. That's just the way everybody lives today. And here, by making direct trust usable, as if people think of it like an email, and doctors think of it the same way, and it's secured. I think that the payload that could be carried by a direct trust message takes in all the different standards that we're all starting to see take place. But answering your question on where do I see things going, I've thought of this a lot in my life, and what I see, that there was a book a long time ago by a person named Alvin Toffler. I think it was Alvin. His name was Toffler, and he wrote The Third Wave. And it was the idea of change happening at an increased rate of speed. And we're at that point now where change is happening so quickly that people are almost not able to manage it anymore because there's too many things going on at once. And they're all different systems and different ways to interface. And so I've likened it to, I could view it in my head. I grew up on the side of the Long Island Sound in New York, and I would just go out there and listen to the waves, and I would watch how smooth the waves were when they came into land, and I would think, oh, that just came from Europe. That wave is so cool, and then it would crash on the sand, and so you'd have this order, this very smooth order of the water and the drops, and all of a sudden it hits the sand, and you have this chaos with these drops, the foam just going all over the place. And I said, what happened to the order? And so the order was still there. It's just that we couldn't see it. So when the wave finished doing its thing and it went back out again, all that crazy foam and chaos went away, and it kind of smoothed itself out. So I would say I really think that we shouldn't look at the way we've done things before and always say that that's the way it's going to have to be done forever. I think the people who are going to inherit this world and are already inheriting it, they have new ideas, and those new ideas are going to work. I have 100% faith in the upcoming generation. I'm very proud to see some of the things they're doing.
Wonderful. And I love that analogy as an ocean person myself. I could certainly appreciate that analogy. And so, Lou, I think this has been a tremendous conversation, and I'm curious if you have any final thoughts or words of wisdom for the listeners today.
Don't lose faith. It will work. Believe in the people who are putting their lives into this. Maybe you don't understand them, and maybe they seem like they're talking from another planet, but they're not, and they're committed. The people in the healthcare technology field are committed. I wanted to be a doctor, but I wasn't smart enough. So I applied to be a CIO, and I told the person who hired me that this was the way I could contribute to the field I love, to the healthcare field I love. So everybody who's in this, not everybody, but a lot of the people who are in this and passionate about it are doing it because they care about humanity. They care about healthcare. So keep the faith. It will work out.
I love that. Thank you, Lou. Congratulations on your recognition as an Interop Hero. And to watch more Interop Hero spotlights like this, visit directtrust.org/Interop Hero.